I'm Kaitlyn Bristowe. Your session is now starting.
Duality therapy.
Welcome to the Welcome to Grape Therapy. I'm your host, Kaitlyn Bristowe, and today I have Emily and Jennifer on, who you may know as the ShrinkChicks. I'm obsessed with them. Our favorite licensed marriage and family therapist, and we talk about how the last time we talked, it was a year ago. A lot of big changes have happened in my life from a year ago, so we decided to talk about navigating big change, small change, building resilience, holding capacity for yourself to grow. And I just think this is always a really important conversation that everyone can benefit from, whether you're 13 or 80. It's so crazy to me because I feel like I talk to you guys often, but that just goes to show how fast time goes by, because it's almost been a year since I came out of Hoffman and we did our podcast around inner child work. And obviously so much has changed, not only our hair, but also love lives, homes, so much has changed in this past year. So we're going to get into it. I know change is obviously inevitable and like that just happens in life, but change feels so difficult all the time, whether it's like big, huge change and making like a shift in your job, a divorce, ending a relationship, to like the smallest thing of like, I need to renovate my bathroom and I want to make a small change just for like whatever it is. It's always feels so overwhelming. So how do you think people should approach big life changes? Like a simple mindset to approach a big change?
Well, the funny thing that we're always going to say is that this is going to depend on knowing yourself, which is why we talk nonstop and you talk nonstop about the point of personal growth. Because how I approach a life change might not be the same way Jen does or that you do. And it's really important to know how you are, right? So for some folks, the mindset's going to have to be, this is going to be hard and I'm going to survive. That no matter what's going to happen here, I'm going to live through this, right? Like that there's going to be, I can do something really hard and it may be challenging. For other people, it's going to be like, I'm going to kick the ass of this change. And part of this is, where does your mentality need to be for what you're about to climb?
Another piece of this too is just understanding that change is a natural part of life. No matter what, throughout our lives, we will constantly be going through transition. The difference is that sometimes those transitions are in our control and sometimes they're not. And I think some of the hardest ones are ones that we didn't necessarily anticipate. And it leaves us open not only to having to process that change, but to also grieve the idea of what the future was going to look like. And I think that piece of it is really hard, and something we really leave out of understanding what it's like to process change is going through that grief and it leaving us vulnerable in those moments to figuring out, well, now what does my life look like? How do I figure this out? Because as human beings, we have a deep fear of the unknown. And even if something's not working for us, we sometimes stay in things in order to avoid the painful feeling of the unknown.
Yes.
And so just understanding that that is a natural process that everyone goes through. And just because you're experiencing this sense of unknown does not mean that you can't get through it and you can't rebuild.
Such a big part of change does come with avoidance. And even if you are set up for success and you know what you're doing, or you don't have the confidence and you didn't predict this coming, like avoidance is a big part of it. So how do you move from avoidance to acceptance?
One of the things to also think about is for a lot of us, when we've invested a lot of time in something, we have a fear of, we'll call it loss of investment, where I've invested time, energy, resources into whether it's a job or a person or a house. And the idea of losing out on that actually leads us to avoidance, right? So it's like, oh, well, you know, right now our relationship totally sucks, but it was good 5 years ago when we put all this work into it and we did all this stuff. And so how can I do it now? So I'm just going to hope and avoid that it just gets better on its own. And so part of the avoidance is also wanting to try to save our investments. And it might sound, I know I'm using business terms and it takes a bit of the emotion out of it, but we do get stuck. And then when we hit that avoidance, we're sitting in grief that we aren't actually accessing it. So it's like I'm sitting in this puddle of something, but I don't actually let myself see it, right? So I'm like sitting there and there's grief around me, but really I'm just like, it's going to get better, guys. Everything is going to be A-okay, but I'm like totally like hip high and shit.
Right.
And so you're not actually avoiding it. Whenever we actually think we're avoiding something, we're actually not, because it's affecting us in all these other ways.
Yeah, that's so hard though, because like I was talking about this with Alicia too, and this happened for me where when I came out of Hoffman, I went because I needed clarity on the few things, and then I eventually just had so much clarity that it was slapping me in the face. And then I'm like, some people would look at that and be like, don't you wish you would have done this earlier or done that? But I'm like, I'm trying to look at it like I didn't waste that time, and my regret is not getting out earlier or moving earlier or whatever I needed to do to make these big changes. It was, I'm actually glad I stayed and got that clarity and figured things out and got to the point where I didn't have to question things anymore. So there's some beauty in avoidance too, if it's like getting you into that puddle to really feel it and drown in it and then go, okay, I see what I need to do now.
Yeah. Well, but I do want to say, it sounds like as much as maybe the action was avoided, you were very much dealing with the emotions that were coming up from it.
Yeah, that's not like full.
Yeah. Like
right?
you were tackling it. And so true. I think, some people have an incredible ability to compartmentalize and put things aside, and then it will trickle into other areas of their life. Right. Where, they might be getting extra angry at their kids when really they're struggling in their relationship, or it's just comes out in other ways. So that's kind of where we see what happens when there is avoidance. And what I would say, if you're listening to this and you're recognizing like, oh, wow, like I am, taking shit out of my kids, or I am struggling with this in different ways, and it's starting to come to the surface, to ask yourself, like, well, what is the cost of not making a decision here? What is the cost of not moving forward and changing something in my life? Because I think that really brings it to the forefront to be able to say, well, okay, the cost is that I am taking it out of my kids, or it is affecting my other relationships. And to really put it, in the forefront of your mind, to make it more conscious as opposed to subconscious, it pushes you more so to make a decision about it.
Yeah, because also I was trying to think of like, how do you break down those overwhelming challenges into like something you can actually digest and then put into action? But you kind of said it. It's asking yourself the right questions and pushing yourself in the right direction.
I think with that too, it allows you to, because, we talked about the fear of the unknown, for you to compare what the cost is to that fear of like, what's going to happen if I make this decision, as opposed to just holding on to like, well, I don't know what that's going to look like, and so I'm just going to stay in this comfort. Right. So it's right in that you're comparing, I feel comfortable, even though I might not be happy, I feel comfortable because I know what's happening. Comparing that to the sense of unknown, right? Of course, you're going to stay in your bubble. If you can look at, well, how is it actually affecting me? What is the cost of me doing this over and over and over again? And then comparing that to the fear of the unknown, I think that allows you to put it in perspective in a different way.
Sometimes when we talk about like decision making, I think people always think that we mean some huge action item. Sometimes decision making is an internal process, right? So like it might be that like, you want to know what? I feel like I have to leave a relationship, or I have to stay in a relationship. But sometimes I make the decision of like, okay, I'm just going to accept this person for who they are. I'm going to accept this for what it is. And I'm going to shift some things around me. And so I think when we talk about some of these terms, which I think over the past like 5 years, right? Like therapy terms have just become like wildfire on the internet, right? So everyone's like, like everything's avoidance, everything's gaslighting, right? And like sometimes it's so much more nuanced than that, because sometimes the avoidance, like Jen had brought up earlier, is at no point were you actually having avoidance. You were going through an internal process of what was happening for you. That takes a very long time, because when we know ourselves and we think things through, and so many of us, especially women, are overthinkers, and so we think through a million things because it's also a way of trying to control it. If I can think through every possible situation, right? The point of overthinking is I hope I come up with a solution. If I think about this enough times, I will figure out a perfect solution here, when a lot of times in life there is no perfect solution. We just choose our hard.
Yes. The choose our hard thing. I want to make that a t-shirt, like choose your hard. What, like, is it harder to stay in the relationship? Is it harder to get out? Is it harder to like even, and I've talked about this on podcasts before, where staying in the comfort of this home that I've just lived in for 8 years, that I've gone through so much. And I'm like, I almost don't know if like you go through the what if spiral. Like, well, what if I actually get in this house and I miss my old one? Like, what if this house is too big for me, which sounds so stupid, but that's how I feel. What if like this isn't my path? What if I've chosen the wrong direction? What if, like, it's all the what if spiral. And then I wanted to ask you guys, how do you get out of the what if spiral, or not even get there in the first place? Or do we all just have to surrender to the what if spiral?
So it's such a good question, because I think so often people are asking that, right? Like, how do I not do the what ifs? And so what I'm about to say is actually pretty counterintuitive, is that I would take yourself into the what ifs, right?
Okay.
So what if I get out of this and I miss it? And then say, okay, well, what if that happens? What am I going to do with that? How will I handle that? Because I think when we stop at the top layer of the what ifs, what we're saying is like, well, what if this happens? If this happens, I won't be able to handle it and I'll have no idea what to do. And when you take yourself into the what ifs, when you ask yourself the questions, you take yourself deeper and deeper. Well, what if this house isn't right for me? What will I do then? How will I handle that? You start to realize that you actually have more resilience and you have built more trust in yourself than you're giving yourself credit. And you prove to yourself that I have actually gotten through so much in my life. I have gone through so many transitions that in the worst case scenario, if I take myself down the what if path, I know that I will be able to handle it. I have resources, I have resilience, and I will be able to get myself through it.
I love that.
ClearStem Skincare is a revolutionary skincare brand that is both anti-aging and anti-acne with zero known hormone disruptors. So if you've ever dealt with breakouts, you know that acne products dry and damage the skin, which also causes premature aging. But anti-aging products keep breaking everyone out because of the thick, pore-clogging fillers they use. You can't win. So I recorded a full episode with the founders of ClearStem, Danielle and Kaylee, back in November. They're so knowledgeable about skincare. It was fascinating. The two partnered because they knew their clients and the world deserved better. Both being in their 30s and extremely acne prone, they decided to make a non-toxic line that targets acne and wrinkles simultaneously. My favorite product of theirs is the Mind Body Skin Supplement. It has become the best natural alternative to prescription acne treatments, and people start seeing results in their skin in less than 1 week. It's wild. Their Hydroberry Moisture Mask is one of my favorite products as well. It goes on, it's just so smooth, and it just smells so dang good too. ClearStem's formulas keep winning award after award, and the hype is real. Trust me, you need to try this line, and you can get 20% off with my code OFFTHEVINE at clearstemskincare.com.
So what Jen's talking about is totally right? It says, if I allow myself to go deeper, right? So when we stay on that surface level, we think that we're going to shock ourselves into making the right decision. Like I said, usually in life, there's lots of different decisions. And sometimes people also get caught up. We hear this all the time, especially people are looking for job changes, right? Well, the other job pays more, or this one pays more. And a lot of times people get stuck into making what is the smart decision versus what's the right decision. Often, the smart decision and the right decision are not the same things. The smart decision is sometimes, well, I bought a house with this person and we invested money in together, and so I should stay, right? Because financially, maybe that's the smart thing to do. And so what we talk about is, if I was to go deeper into these fears, what if I made the wrong mistake? What if I quit my job and the one that I moved to isn't the right one? All right, then what would you do? I guess we'd look for a different job. I guess I'd be pretty sad and depressed. Okay, so what would we do if that happened? And we keep going deeper into what is really behind it, right? And for a lot of people, the deep, deep below is fear of what other people will think about me, fear that I'll be lonely, fear that I'll have ruined everything and hate myself, fear of, all these things, the deep, deep wounds we might have inside. If I leave this relationship, so I lose also all my friends.
Like, they're almost like this could be a setback where I'm gonna now if I'm not only gonna lose this job, but now I'm gonna lose these friends. I'm not only gonna lose this relationship, but now I'm gonna lose this family and people are gonna have to make a choice. And at the end of the day, it's always that fear of loss and being alone. And it's so interesting how everything comes back to that in life.
Yes. And I think it is a very human need to be connected to people.
Yeah.
It's so important for us to have connections. And so when you experience a grief like death, right, it's something that you don't have control over. When you experience a loss like a breakup, right, where sometimes you do have control over that loss, but it's such a huge, it's like you making a decision to go through this huge grief process where not only are you losing the relationship, you're losing relationships that were connected to that relationship. You're losing the idea of what the future is going to look like. Like, it is a huge experience to go through. It doesn't mean that you can't get through it. What it does mean, it's going to take time. It's going to take processing. It's going to take a lot of support around you. And so, of course, to make a choice to go into that is a really difficult decision.
One of the things I'm thinking about is I know that I sound like a broken record, but one of the things is that this is why it's important to understand the lens of which you see the world, right? So if I'm considering leaving a job, one of the things I have to think about with this consideration is, let's imagine I put on a pair of glasses, and I'm going to put on a pair of glasses that is my idea of like, what's the hardship that I'm scared of, right? So for like, I'm taking an example for myself, fear of abandonment and being alone, unlovable. So when I think about any type of transition and I consider the glasses in which I'm putting it in on, okay, if I end this relationship with this person, my fear is that every other person that was, a shared mutual person is going to leave, because my fear is I'm unlovable and then I'll always end up alone. And so now I have to try to say, okay, well, what if I was to take those glasses off, right? So what if I wasn't so scared about everyone leaving, or I didn't go to my biggest fear? Does it change how I feel about this decision I'm trying to make? So what glasses are you wearing when you look at all the hard things in your life?
I love that.
And I think if you take the idea of I'm unlovable, we can take that so much deeper of like, where did this idea of how you're going to relate to the world, where did that start for you? And I think that big transitions, big changes, they bring those things up for us, right? So one of them might be, I fear that I'm unlovable, might be, I fear that everyone's going to abandon me, I'm going to be rejected, right? So we all have these, if we use like psychobabble terms, introjects, where we have this idea of how we're going to relate to the world, to other people, based on our upbringing, based on how we grew up, based on experiences that we had in childhood. And we bring them into adulthood and they play out in these ways of relating to people. And so what happens is that we react in a similar way that we might react when we were a child, because maybe when we were children it worked for us.
Yep.
And we bring those coping mechanisms, ones that were once really helpful for us, we bring them into adulthood. And they were things that once really helped us, and they are now things that no longer are serving us.
Yeah, they're in fact hurting us.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And they end up hurting us. So my question would be, if you're, thinking about going through a big life change and recognizing that it's something that you need to change, but you're holding on based on childhood experiences, I would ask you to look at, does this actually fit with my circumstances now? Or is this something that's coming from old wounds that I'm holding on to?
So to make it a little bit more understanding, so what Jen's talking about is what we call as adaptive child, right? So let's say I grew up in a household where my parents were super busy. And they always had a lot going on, and I'm one of 4 kids, and there was just a lot of stuff in my house. Was it intentional? Nobody was a quote unquote bad parent. Nobody was inebriated. It was just the way life happens. But let's say in this family, the only way I really got my attention is when I totally melted down, right? Like, it really took me getting to like a pretty bad point for me to be heard. So I scream or I have a fight, and then all of a sudden everyone's like, what is happening with Emily? And then I got my needs met. Great.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is going to happen in adulthood? Even if I don't need to be doing those things, I haven't learned to actually be able to say, hey, I'm really hurting right now. And I'm really hurting, so I actually need to give you to give me a hug right in this moment. What I'm probably going to do is, you never give me affection. I do so much and nobody ever says anything to me.
Yeah.
Because in that moment, little Emily is coming out and she really, really, really needs to be heard, but she's doing a really, really, really bad job at doing that. Because when you come at that, surprisingly, nobody actually wants to hear you.
Right.
Then all of a sudden you're labeled as something that's probably a trigger for you.
My niece, and I know she won't mind me saying this because we're podcasting actually later today, and she's very open about this stuff. She's 15 years old, and she goes back and forth from moms to dads, two very different parenting styles. She's hormonal because she's 15, and she has these temper tantrums, and I remember having them at that age too, just as a hormonal teen, but these just seem next level. And there's so many things I feel so terrible because I'm like, I want her to be able to go to therapy, build this resilience. And because I was the same way as a child, that I think I did temper tantrums. I also would fake sick to get attention, which I would find myself doing in adult relationships as well. And obviously over the years of doing so much therapy and working on myself, I've built like the capacity to understand myself better and to give myself a little more grace, or to see where I'm reacting the way I shouldn't. Like I've built that up. But as a 15-year-old, like you talk about resilience, how do you don't have much life experience to build that capacity. So how do you build resilience as a teen, even as an adult?
It's such a good question. The thing I was thinking about while you're talking, and I said this to my husband the other day, because we were visiting my niece, and I was like, it really sucked to be a child. And reason being is that you have no control over anything. You have no control. She has no control over going back and forth, and so I think sometimes temper tantrums too are our way to like try to regain control over our environment, and we have no control over our environment during that time.
Right.
And so it's just another example of how when you're an adult, you do have more control over your environment. You can create your routine, you can set boundaries, you can choose, who you want to be with, what you want to do. You have so much more control over your life, but your childhood self is telling you still have no control. And so you're using the same coping mechanisms that you once used. And so I think it starts with understanding how much more control you have over your life as an adult. And if there's places where you don't feel like you have control, to ask yourself questions about that. What's difficult about that for me? So, an example of this might be in relationships where, like, let's say you have a friend who wants to do something and you don't want to do that thing, but you go anyway, right? So it's like, it's difficult to set boundaries with people, to say, listen, I can't do that tonight. I need to stay in, whatever. And so for you to ask yourself the question of like, where are the areas in my life where I don't feel like I have the control that I need over my own life to be able to navigate and regulate my own emotions? And those are the pain points to look at, to say, well, how can I improve that? What can I do differently? Because I think that the temper tantrums are just a way of trying to regain control over an experience that you really have no control over. So reminding yourself as an adult, here's what I can do to feel like I have more control over my decisions in my life.
It's a funny thing also on a societal level, if we want to zoom out a little bit, about how we treat anyone who's gone through puberty, which is we look at someone who's gone through puberty and we think they're an adult, which is not correct. If you were 15, your brain is not developed. You actually have no freaking idea what you're doing. I mean, you could not pay me enough money to ever be a 15-year-old girl ever again, no matter what.
It's the worst.
It doesn't matter, right? Because we live in a society actually that you go through puberty and society decides, well, you should behave a certain way now. Now, if my 3-year-old has a breakdown in the grocery store, then you get met with a few different stuff. One, people are total dickheads, get your kid under control. Another, oh my God, that person's struggling. And one is like, I'm going to pretend that you're not having this breakdown right now. And that kind of is how life is, right? So one is people say to you, get your stuff together. I'm not going to give into this. Another one is people can overly give into it. And the other one is people ignore and avoid you altogether. And that happens throughout time of all this looks together. But the reality is that skills must be built. So when we talk about things like building resilience or building self-esteem, it is always through mastery. We have to experience hard things to be able to handle hard things. That's how it happens. Now, there are some people that are more prone to resiliency, right? Because of different life skills. They have a more positive outlook. They have less childhood trauma. There's ways to evaluate that. But the reality is that most of us need a life experience. Most people in their 30s will say, my 30s are way better than my 20s. Most people in their 40s will say, my 40s are way better. And my 50s, 50s. There's a reason for that. It's not because life gets so much better. It's because we have a much higher tolerance the more we go through. And to look at someone's, and I think about this the same way. If you think about someone's developmental age at 15, I say the same thing about people in relationships. If you've only been with someone for 3 years, that is developmental age of 3. It's going to have a lot of problems. That's normal.
And I think a piece that goes into this too, and we talked about this, Kaitlyn, a year ago when you came out of Hoffman, is part of this is asking yourself in those moments when you're breaking down, when you're struggling, to say, well, what do I need right now? Ask yourself the questions that no one ever asked you as a child. This is part of the reparenting work that when you're younger, you don't have the language, you don't have the words to be able to say, hey, I'm having a temper tantrum because I am really in need of this. I need to be taken care of in this way. And part of building that resilience is to be able to ask yourself those questions of, well, what do I need in these moments? How did I want to be parented? What would have been really helpful for me? How can I self-soothe? How can I help regulate my own emotions? And that might take time. And that might, as Emily said, that might take a ton of experience of going through this and asking yourself that question over and over and over again. And, we see this in, when we work with individual clients. We also see this when we work with couples, because we'll say something like, well, what were you looking for in those moments? And often the response is, well, I didn't want this and I didn't want this. As opposed to, well, I was looking for you to attune to my needs, and I was looking for you. A lot of the time we hear people say, I don't even know. Like, I don't even know what I wanted in those moments, because we never learn to attune to our own needs. If no one was attuning to what our needs were growing up, then as an adult, it's extra hard to attune to your own needs. So you might have to ask yourself that question over and over and over again.
Well, it's even nice to think about that like as like an aunt in that situation. But I do want to like just ask those questions, and I want her to be able to know, I guess, the answer, like, what do you need? But at 15, how do you know? Because sometimes even like you said, in relationships and as adults, you might be like, I actually don't even know what I needed in that moment. But I think even having that conversation with a kid at the age of 15 to even just start to be aware of maybe asking yourself like, okay, when I'm having these breakdowns, like maybe I just sit in my room and I write down what I actually need, like almost like, what do they call it? Flow writing, where you don't even stop the pen and you just keep writing. Like, obviously that's hard to do in the middle of a breakdown, but even after, like as soon as you're done, you just take that pen to the paper, and like maybe that could be a tool that you have to understand even what you need.
So something we're also talking about is, how do we blame the system, not the person? So in general, right, usually we have a broken down system. We don't know how to handle each other with big feelings. That's an issue with the system, not a person issue. And so how do we as a family develop a new system, right? So somebody starts having big feelings. Who's the person that can handle that and step in? Who's the one who really needs to have to learn to walk away? And how do we invent a new system in our relationships? And this also comes, once again, with knowing how you are in a situation. I'm the person typically that needs a timeout. So Jed and I were in a meeting last week. We own this big company. And I'm in this meeting, and I know I just have the world's worst resting bitch face. Like, things are bad. I am having these feelings, and they weren't feelings of anger, but I was looking angry because I was feeling shut down. Typically in a workplace environment, you smile and get through a meeting, and then everything's uncomfortable. The nice thing about owning a business is you actually don't have to do that. So very quickly, I said, I actually have to end this meeting. I'm having something big come up, and I can't say what it is, but I know I have to stop this meeting now and restart it. We got off the meeting, able to come down, restarted the meeting 15 minutes later, ends up with a wonderful solution by the end of this. But I needed to know, because I could also know that how I was looking to other people wasn't going to make them feel good. And it wasn't about them.
And we also have had to go through that experience multiple times, right? There's so many times in business where you have to have uncomfortable conversations. And so we have had to go through that over and over and over again in order to figure out what's the best way to communicate this in the moment. How do we handle this so that we can make a rational decision that's not based off an emotional reaction? And that has taken time. And that's what I mean when we say it takes time and experience in order to figure out what works best. And I love, Kaitlyn, you sound like an amazing aunt for you to be able to say, you know, I want to know what I can do in those moments for you, and to help her just think about what is it that I might need in these moments like that, and to do that at a time in which she's not reactive. And I think that's where we get stuck, is that so often we try to ask someone what they need when they're feeling really reactive, where I would encourage anyone who's going through this to take the time away from it to say like, hey, I didn't know what to do. I want to support you. I want to be there for you. What is it that you might need in those moments? What can I give to you? Like, if I think about myself when I was 15 and I was breaking down, something that I would need is someone to just say, I see you, and like, I know you're going to be okay, and I'm here if you need me, right? Like, to know that there was like a secure base there that I could go to if I needed it, but it wasn't someone overstepping or trying to tell me not to feel what I'm feeling. That doesn't necessarily mean what she needs or what everyone needs, but I think too, just thinking about, well, what did I need in those moments? What did I need? Also allows you to take that into adulthood of like, well, what does that look like for me as an adult?
Okay, let's pause to talk about the Wella Professional's new line, the Ultimate Repair. It's the most premium line to date, developed with over 140 years of experience and research to deliver their very best. And get this, the Miracle Hair Rescue repairs hair in only 90 seconds. I use it every single time I shower, even a busy girl like me. I have 90 seconds, okay? I'm sure you've seen the results on my Instagram. This luxury product has floral scents and rich textures, and it's designed for all hair types. It's the perfect leave-in spray treatment for anyone and everyone. With key ingredients like AHA and omega-9, it actually rebuilds the hair bonds inside the strands and replenishes the outside barrier of damaged hair in, like I said before, only 90 seconds. So easy to use, you guys. I just spray the Ultimate Repair Miracle Hair Rescue all over my wet hair and then wait the 90 seconds that it takes to do its thing, and voila, that's it. You don't have to rinse. You don't have to even apply heat. It repairs hair damage in 90 seconds, no matter what. So I get why they call it Miracle Hair Rescue. It truly is a little miracle. So try the Ultimate Repair Miracle Hair Rescue with 10% off the travel size on Amazon by using promo code 10VINE. Okay, unwrap the first of many presents this season with Holidays on the House from DraftKings Casino. With hundreds of games, prizes, and promos, DraftKings Casino has everything on your list. And right now, new players who play $5 get $100 instantly in casino credits. What a deal. So what are you waiting for? You can cozy up with all the classics like slots, blackjack, and roulette. I love blackjack, or even play exclusive games that you can find only at DraftKings Casino. So download the DraftKings Casino app now and sign up with the promo code VINE and play $5 to get $100 in casino credits. That's promo code VINE only at DraftKings Casino. The crown is yours. Do you have a gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. Must be 21 years or older. Physically present in Connecticut, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, West Virginia only. Void in Ontario. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. One per opted and new customer. $5 wager required. Max $100 in casino credits awarded, which require a one-time playthrough within 7 days. Terms at casino.draftkings.com/holidays-on-the-house. Restrictions apply.
So therapists do this thing called objective observing, and this is the thing. Here's behind the scenes, y'all, of what therapists do, right? So we do this thing called
therapist secrets.
Yes, therapist secrets. Hashtag. People do hashtags anymore. I don't know. That joke didn't fly. Someone edit that. Okay, I do.
Emily's been off it. Emily's been off social media, so she's like become.
I don't know what's happened. Yeah.
Bless.
So, and what we do is when we look at objective observing, it's like, how do I just observe what's happening? And then we do this other thing where we say that everything is information. So let's say I'm in a session with a client and they say, you are such a bitch. And one, I can be like, wow, I really messed up. Or I could say, oh, ew, what the heck? Or I could say, that's a lot of information. It's a lot of information that what I said got that reaction from you. And this is the same thing in all of our relationships, is that when things happen, we can do a few things. We can offer self-compassion. We can beat ourselves up. Oh, I'm the worst aunt in the world. I froze. I didn't know what to do. How could I have gotten this so wrong? Or, wow, what I tried there didn't work. I guess I have to do something different next time. And when we start really embedding that level of self-compassion into our relationships, with ourself, it actually leads to a lot more resiliency because I'm not beating myself up at every turn. If you want to talk about how you really build resiliency, self-compassion and mastery are what we're talking about here. And that means you get to mess up all the time. I make mistakes every day in my life, all the time. Right? I knew how to stop that business meeting because 6 months ago, I made a mistake in a business meeting where I didn't stop it and things didn't go well.
Yeah.
And so when you say, and I had a thing, which is after that first time I did, I could say, God, I wasn't cut out for this. I have to get out. I'm so horrible. Or I could say, man, I guess I should do something different next time.
Yeah, I think that's a really important life lesson, is to think of a mistake as, I'm going to try something different next time. Because, we all say that definition of insanity about doing the same thing over and expecting a different result. That kind of comes into play in, these situations as well. I even hear, Sydney at a young age talking about, like, I thought I would be like this in school, and I thought I would be learning at this level, and I'm just not. And I'm like, that doesn't stop as an adult either. This idea of I'm not where I'm supposed to be in life. And, at like 38, I didn't think I'd be single and not having any children. And like life just throws you off in so many different ways, in a different path of what we're supposed to be on. So what would you say to a client who feels like change is setting them back? Because I think, like, for me personally, I thought going through another breakup and moving to a new house was going to be a setback, when of course that was just the fear talking. So what do you say to people who feel like change is a setback?
One of the things we love to talk about with clients is their expectations and where they developed those expectations of, well, I'm supposed to be at this place at this time. And we all have them. Even as therapists in doing this, like, as much as we want to deny it, like, we all have expectations about, this is where I'm supposed to be. And if I'm not there, then something must be wrong with me. And then we personalize it of, well, this must mean something about me, because if I look at what my expectation was, or maybe what my peers are doing, right? We're comparing ourselves to other people. It leaves us feeling less than. We start to personalize it. So I would start by helping clients question their expectations around who they're supposed to be, what they're supposed to be doing. Where did they develop that? Why is it important that they're holding on to that? Who told you that that was where you were supposed to be? Is there room to be able to question that for yourself? Because I want you to look at holding on to that expectation. What's it doing to you? What's it doing to your self-esteem? What's it doing to your sense of self? Because in reality, there is no right or wrong. Society has told us that you have to do things in a very specific way. But in reality, there is no, you need to be doing this at this point. And so I understand that's a lifetime of society telling you and social media telling you, and allows you to question, okay, why aren't I at that place? But instead of questioning yourself, I would question society. And I would say, well, am I allowed to do things differently? Am I allowed to make my own path, have my own journey? And what is it really doing to me to hold myself to this standard, this expectation that isn't working for me?
I talk about it all the time with, like things that I've gone through in my life. And I think there are these big setbacks when really the setback has been the biggest opportunity for growth. And even like, I keep saying my age, not like I'm old or anything, but just like at 38, this again, quote unquote setback has actually made me look into again what I'm doing wrong in relationships, how I can grow from this. How do we encourage, like, even listeners, our friends, family, how do we encourage individuals to view setbacks as opportunities for growth?
Well, I think one of the things to keep in mind is, right, so like it's a very zoomed in idea, right? If we were to zoom out and I was to interview, let's say, 20 people that stayed in relationships or homes or jobs that maybe they thought weren't right for them, and I said, would you do it again? They'd typically say no. People stay in things because fear. So if fear wasn't there, how much is that driving you? How much does fear rule your life? And fear of, aka a setback, which isn't really a setback, right? It's a switch, it's a move, it's scary. But if fear is the driving force behind why I do or don't do things, it's going to limit your life.
I also think the feelings that we experience as a result of a big change we read those feelings, right? Any challenging, difficult feelings as something must be wrong, right? Like I must be doing something wrong, as opposed to this is natural and it's embedded into the change in and of itself. That's part of looking at things from an objective perspective, is even looking at your emotions from an objective perspective, to be able to say, just because I'm sad doesn't mean I'm doing something wrong. Just because I'm doing something differently doesn't mean I'm doing something wrong. Just because I'm lonely doesn't mean I'm doing something wrong. And it doesn't mean that I will feel this way forever. It doesn't mean that I will be sad forever. It doesn't mean that I won't be able to make changes to my life. So often we feel these difficult emotions and we get very stuck in them and we ruminate over them. And because we always get this question on our podcast of like, how do I not feel this? And our answer to that is always, you have to feel it. It's part of being human. Part of being human is feeling those challenging emotions, because without the challenging emotions, we also wouldn't be able to feel the really positive, great emotions too. And so as a human being, to just recognize that your challenging emotions are not a signal that you're doing something wrong or that something's wrong with you. It is just a signal that you are human.
That's really, that like made right here tingle because I wanted to
good.
cry. That's so nice. I love that. And then let's say, fast forward, you've taken the leap, you've quit the job, you've filed for divorce, you've left the relationship, whatever that is where you've taken that leap and you're so vulnerable. What are the steps to start to build yourself back up? What are little things that we can do to build ourselves back up? Is it goal setting? Is it like, we always talk about how it's the little things. It's not these big, massive shifts. It's the micro shifts. So do you have any advice for the steps to build yourself back up?
So one of the things Jen talked about again is we never want to ignore grief. It is normal. Grief is a part of change. So one, we're going to make space for grief. And then we're also going to make space to dream. Do I let myself dream of what my life could look like or what I'd like it to look like? Maybe I realize that I don't want to live in an apartment building. I want to live on land. Maybe I realize I got to get out of this house. I want to live in a condo and have no responsibility, right? What is the dreaming I allow myself to do? I think that there's a part, and if you're someone who's like, I got to be practical, man, I got to make a list every day, I got to go on one Hinge date a week, right? Like when we do those things, they can be helpful sometimes, but then any type of rigidity might be difficult, because when we're coming out of a massive life transformation or change like this, we need there to be flexibility and adaptability. So a guideline is great, rigidity is not. So the guideline of, I'm going to reach out to 2 friends a week. That's great until you're like, I need to sit at home and cry, but I have to call these 2 friends. Then all of a sudden I'm resenting 2 friends I called and there's no reason. It doesn't make any sense. So this would mean is like guidelines versus rigidity, right? So guidelines, I want you to think about soothing, right? Heart, soul, physical, any of these things, right? Am I reading things that inspire me? Am I dreaming about things that inspire me? Am I moving my body in a way that feels good? Am I surrounding myself by love? But am I also not trying to like enter into the toxic positivity? Oh, this is so great. Everything's so great. Even if you're super hype about your decision, it's normal for there to be grief with it. Even if you're like, this is 100% the right thing, that doesn't mean you don't get to also be really sad and grieving for what's going on.
Yeah, because I think as human beings, we have a hard time holding on to like duality of this can be the right decision and also I can feel sadness, and both things can be true. And I think even, you know, when someone asks you, how are you doing? They expect like a one answer, right? We're like, oh, I'm good. You know, I'm fine. As opposed to like, oh, I'm doing really well. Things are good. And also at the same time, I'm sad, right? Like we really don't hold on to that answer when someone is saying, hey, how are you doing? We're just like, oh, I'm good, I'm fine. So I think socially, it's hard for us to kind of hold on to multiple emotions at once and to recognize them to be true. And so just to know that it's something that's natural. It's something that we hold on to. It's very human to have 2 things at once.
We kind of brought up the term toxic positivity. Like we don't want to go there. And I know that mindset obviously matters. And I always wonder how to cultivate like a positive mindset to face challenges while also not being delusional and being like, everything's great. Like, how do you try and like have that positive mindset or a good, healthy mindset to face challenges while not going into like too much this way, too much that way?
The first thing I would say is recognize what your automatic thought is. Like what are the automatic thoughts that come up for you? When those automatic thoughts come up, I think you can also start to question them, as opposed to saying, I shouldn't be thinking this, I shouldn't have this thought, I should be positive and I should be thinking about this in this way, right? To just be able to say, well, why am I thinking about it in this? Is it necessarily true that everything's going to fall to shit? Is it necessarily true that I won't be able to get through this? So the difference is with toxic positivity, you're forcing a thought on yourself of, well, I need to believe this, right? You're putting yourself in a box, you're holding yourself to a standard, an expectation that you might not really be able to connect with, as opposed to saying, well, why is my mind going there? Is that necessarily true? You're approaching the thoughts with more so curiosity to help move yourself in a different direction.
So we talk about the term they use a lot in therapy world is the cognitive distortion of black and white thinking or dichotomous thinking, right? There's only one, right? So when the pandemic got announced, I went to a place of like, everything's over. I'm going to the bank. I'm getting cash out. I'm hiding it underneath my mattress. Like I'm going to full doomsday prep, right? Yeah. At no point was I like, man, this might be hard. I was like, everything is horrible. Things are bad, right? And so what we're also once again is talking about in terms of flexibility. If my first thought is a rigidity thought, everything's bad, everything's good, he's sad, so I don't get to be sad, right? That is a very, very black and white thought. Only one way. Mm-hmm. None of life works like that. We have to hold the complexities of life.
Well, and it's hard when you're on this platform of people who aren't very complex and do see things as black and white, yep. And they expect you to have the same mindset as them. And then so you start to believe things like, even, you know, the amount of people that have told me that my face looks plastic or whatever, I start to be like, okay, do I have a face? And I'm just like delusional about it, because the amount of people that start to say it. But you know, everybody has this like black and white way of thinking. It seems to be online more than anywhere. I've had this really good mindset lately of, am I taking feedback from somebody where I would want to be in their position? Am I looking up to them? Do I want to be this Karen online? Like, do I want to be in their shoes? And the answer is no. So why am I listening to their feedback? But I think it's like the noise comes in too. And it doesn't mean you need to have a big platform and millions of people to be following you to have people questioning like the way that you think, because they think differently. So it's kind of about getting like into your own zone as well and not listening to that noise.
Even that process. First of all, Kaitlyn, I can't even imagine like having to like deal. We'll get like one or two negative comments and it will break us down. I can't even imagine what that's like. But I think that it also speaks to, you know, the more that you experience that, the more you learn how to deal with it in a way that protects you and protects your peace and protects your sense of self. Because I can imagine when that first started happening, it probably completely shook you for a loop, and having to go through that over and over and over again, right? And this kind of ties back to what we were talking about at the beginning, that sometimes it takes going through those experiences to figure out, how do I best want to deal with this? How, you know, do I want to let this person's comment infiltrate, you know, my sense of self? And if not, how do I want to boundary that off? What do I want to do differently? What is this going to look like for me?
You're right. Like, this is a very specific thing to social media. If I was sitting with a bunch of friends and somebody told me that they comment mean things on random celebrities' Instagram, I'd be like, man, that person's a little whacked. Like, I don't know if I really want to be Susie's friend anymore, right? Like, that would like change how I feel about somebody. There is such a massive lack of nuance on social media. And when your job has things on social media, and the other thing is, people also think that they are entitled to make comments about you and your life because you choose to put things about you and your life on social media. So all of a sudden people are like, if she does it, I get to do it. And like, that is such, it's interesting that like social media really brings the childness out in someone.
Yes.
Right? Like, that's some stuff my toddler would do.
Well, I was just going to say, it also makes me think about how, right? Because I feel like people comment sometimes because they want attention from other people, or they want attention from you, or right? So they'll make the meanest comment so that they're getting attention from other people. It made me think of, as you were saying, like, it's very childlike to do that too. And it speaks to the fact that like people are trying to get their needs met, these like deep-seated needs that were never met on social media through your platform.
It's actually pretty sad.
Yeah. So
It's sad, but it's
I wanna
also,
hug
look,
'em.
but here's the duality. It's sad that that's your experience, and it's also really sad that that's your experience and that's taken out on you. Both
Yeah.
things can exist at the same time because we all live in this world together in this very complex situation. And social media does not hold nuance or complexities.
No, it's very one-dimensional on there. But before we wrap up, is there anything exciting, any updates on your podcast or the therapy group? And also, where can the Vinos find more of your valuable content?
We're always so excited to be here with you, Kaitlyn. Thank you for having us on. A year later, things really changed. Right? Last time we saw you was a year ago. And things change in a year. If you're interested in keeping up with that, you can check us out at ShrinkChicks anywhere that you listen to podcasts. But what we're really, really, really passionate about is we own a company called the Therapy Group, where we have all down-to-earth clinicians in lots of different states. We've expanded a ton over the past few years. If you are looking to start, change, switch up your therapeutic journey, we would love to help match you with a clinician. You can check us out, thetherapygroup.com. Every single person that comes in is matched with a clinician by Jen and myself directly. This is what we are passionate about. This is what we believe we are put on this earth for, is to help people find good therapy and therapists. So thank you for having us on.
Thank you so much.
You're doing amazing work, and I just always enjoy our conversations so much. So happy holidays, and
You too.
probably talk to you in a year.
Yeah, we'll be here.
Good. See you in a year. We'll be here.
I'm Kaitlyn Bristowe. Your session is now ending. And if I'm being honest, I wouldn't mind a rating and review.